The nice thing about CNN and CNBC and those stations on the internet or on TV is every other thing in life appears valuable and shining in comparison to them. They are the most boring, repetitious, trite commercial baseline that makes an ant crawling across a sandwich exciting in comparison. This is about personal public relations, the fact that size and scale matter, and our modern society is very mass oriented. 100,000 employees in an organization with one leader, so called, who doesn't deliver much leading. Um, and people get lost. You know, it's the organization man phenomena. It's those paintings by that guy in Manhattan of the empty coffee shop at night in the street light. The loneliness of being in a crowd, the lonely crowd, as the book said. First of all, traits and paradoxes of bigness. This is the too much audience and too little audience all at the same time in a big organization. Too much audience because everybody observes what you're doing, even though they don't have the full context. They misinterpret and they like to feel superior to you, so they bitch about what you do. And so you get a vast majority of negative feedback for anything you do from ill-informed people who observe it. The audience is too big. It means actually doing anything is such a hassle that people gradually scale down and do less and less and less over their career. The too small audience is big organizations mean it's if you do a really great job in your job, nothing happens. Nobody notices and you don't get anything but nominal, petty little rewards like cheese for rats. Um, and therefore doing a really good job is punished, in effect, by big organizations, which is why they don't have a lot of people doing a really good job. Um, our people are everything. Yes, yes, yes. And my millions in the bankroll, that's just symbolic. My 13th boat. Um, Traits and paradoxes of bigness include the problem of getting attention to yourself, existing in a real sense as opposed to in a number out of 100,000. And that requires visibility. And it's hard to do because there are so many people competing for visibility. There's this noise of innovation of people trying to look innovative to get top manager attention. Um, this selects for people with enormous boldness and creativity, people who are willing to just screw everybody and do something that no one else would ever imagine or have the courage to do. Erect cultures. Uh, it's hard to do anything individually in a big organization, and so you do your action steps are cultures you erect, a culture of risk taking, because big organizations are cowards, and the people who lead them are cowards, universally cowards. You don't get to be CEO by being a courageous changer. You get to be CEO by taking credit for luck and definitely giving credit for bad luck to your competitors. Uh, Culture of development. There are 21 characteristics of cultures that develop economically. And if you set those cultures up, you get a group to develop economically within a big organization that isn't itself. Cultures of high performance. This is ways to intensify the culturedness of a group by having them practice more shared routines faster and better. Um, Using networks and their traits. There's a big deal about this. Ron Bird had a book on networks, and many of the world's most boring books have been written on network theory. And other than hubs, the fact that networks are clumpy and bigger clumps are more useful than smaller clumps a lot of the time. Weak ties. I mean, we have 3 or 4 really general results of network theory that aren't really much use to anybody. The fact of the matter is that most people don't build networks. They happenstance into networks somebody else built. And not surprisingly, they don't get a lot from networks somebody else built. So if you're going to use networks and their traits, you're going to have to build a network yourself. And to do that, you're going to have to fight for and get attention. And to do that, you're going to have to be a performer, a spectacular performer. And to do that, you're going to have an anthropological stance that frees people from the limits of their own culture and upbringing, and a theological stance that frees people from the limits of the human condition. Performance culture. This is the give the rats a little piece of cheese and they'll all run harder to make the CEO richer with the money he steals from the company. I mean, employment is a very, 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 very bad deal. That's why they have to talk about how important you are all the time, because you aren't. You are replaceable, easily replaceable. And so everybody lies about that, and you pretend that you're not replaceable, and they pretend that you're not replaceable. But everybody can see every minute of the day you are very replaceable. And so being an employee sort of is a voluntary exposure to your own worthlessness. It's sort of practice dying, pre-death practice. People create their own businesses not because they want to be rich, not because they want to be a boss, although about a third of them do it just because they want to be a tyrant. But because they simply don't want to be an employee. And given how ugly employment is, it's very understandable that almost anything, selling ice cream in a lemonade stand franchise is better. Performance cultures are organizations where everybody's always talking about leadership in spite of the fact that 99.999% of the people just do following all the time. And so it's clear that all this talk about leadership is to disguise from the followers the fact that they're really all obeying the one leader, our Führer, the CEO. Especially in Anglo cultures with dictatorial traditions of fatherhood and dictatorial hitting kid traditions of motherhood, and top-down autocratic control of information so that managers hoard information and employees have no idea the context of anything. You have to live in Japan for years. You have to live in Nordic Europe for years to understand the totalitarian nature of the American character. And they talk about democracy all the time because they're the least democratic people in the world. Really, I mean, it's quite clear now that that's true. So performance cultures are basically like advertising cultures, living in a direct opposite of your condition because you're unwilling to admit to yourself what the truth is. Using this, we have to motivate the employees. Why do you have to motivate them all the time? Because it's basically a really bad deal. So they need motivation. Here's another piece of cheese to keep you alive one more day, barely, while you work really hard to make me richer for my 14th house. Using the 64 ways persons and groups learn bigness. In big organizations, people learn, and chunks of organizations learn, and individuals learn, and they all learn in the same 64 ways. And you can actually map how many ways are being used at the moment by somebody or some group. And you can measure this for an entire organization. I've done it. And it's really useful. I mean, you just get, why is this group, our best performing group, focused on these 3 ways of learning? Are they better for our product and our market? I mean, this group is by far the best performance, and they're very narrow, and they're only learning 3 ways. And then why is this other group that's learning 20 ways doing nothing? And so, it's not, I don't have my mind around the whys of that. I'm just doing the assessments now. And all of us, me and the customer alike, are amazed at the unpredictable results, not anything any of us would have guessed. And, we even did a little tinkering with this group that was a high-performing group and had 3 ways of adding a 4th way, and it reduced their performance. Making them learn in another way reduced their performance. So there's some real science to be done here, and we don't know yet. But at least the beginning is to build a map of what people are doing that works and doesn't work, and look at combinations that work for one group and see if they work for a group that in some ways yet to be determined similar. This is just beginning research. Managing by events and just-in-time managing. I mean, the leadership functions are delivered almost all over the world, except in Nordic Europe and Japan, via a fixed inventory regime of a special social class of people called managers, who do what all fixed inventory regimes do, overshoot and undershoot, that is, overmanage and undermanage at the same time. So you get virtually no directedness and very little of the 64 basic functions of leadership delivered to the workforce. But you do get a kind of central show of upper monkeys dancing around looking leaderly by talking about leadership all the time and saying how important their people are when they buy their 14th house. And pay themselves 50 times what they pay these very important people below them. You're important, but not for money purposes. For money purposes, only I am important. For talk purposes, you're important. For money purposes, I am important. Managing by events is the fact that the internet is doing all process work, and more so and more so all the time. Every process in the world is being compiled onto the internet. As bandwidth in the internet increases to allow live video and from multiple screens at the same time, live video chat, almost everything in every process in the world will be put onto the web, and this doesn't work because there is essential face-to-faceness needed. And how much face-to-faceness per how much process time on the web is something to be researched. There's a ratio that works up to a certain point and then doesn't work after a certain point. That point needs to be determined. In other words, we need salt and pepper sprinkling of intense events on groups that are scattered around the world sharing processes. And managing by events means taking things done slowly and amateurishly by over a long period of time, invisibly by small staffs, and getting them done using expert procedures very intensely with high visibility in a 2 or 3 day intensity event of 12-hour-a-day workshops. The 40 workshops in parallel that combine their partial results to make an impressive overall result. Kinds of power and power deployment. Power in big organizations. There's two ways of looking at it. One of them is the Anglo culture lie and delusion because of the tyrannical nature of fathering in Western cultures. The illusion there that large organizations have a fixed amount of authority, and what you do is you fight to get the pieces of it, the bigger piece than somebody else, in a zero-sum game. Versus the Nordic Europe idea that the same organization can have 3 times or 5 times the authority by the way that it authorizes and liberates people to take initiatives with enough support and checking resources to keep them from getting themselves in trouble. And so you'll find 300 people at a Swedish firm, when you measure it, every one of them with 8 times the authority of their equivalent American competitor firm, even though the number of people is the same. But the Swedish employees have deployed the authority to take initiatives vastly more than the Americans have, and the Swedish deploy the information to succeed, whereas the American executives hoard it to protect their careers and don't deploy it to the workers. So even if they have a initiative authority, they don't have the information to do it correctly and make it work. So this is called just-in-time flexible authority systems, where the amount of authority can vary per unit time and can go up and down. Selection and promotion of long-term allies. This is really a constant effort to make proposals with other people as your partner for the purpose of seeing who's a liar and a cheat, so that you can break off relations with them forever, and then keep making the proposals till you find somebody who's trustable. And boy, in America, with Americans, it's really hard because they are raised to be dishonest, evil, backstabbing bastards. And that's why immigrants dominate in Silicon Valley, because they can trust each other, and the Americans cannot be trusted at all. And, just look at your high school friends. The 5 levels of communicating. What you say is not what others hear. And so effectively delivering a message which means X in your context requires looking at how your context, there's several layers of it, are different than their context, several layers, and then translating into what you would say to enact the same meaning in their different layers of context. It requires really careful crafting. Very few people do it. Actually, CEOs end up fairly good at this intuitively. It's one of their mental skills. And they read these context differences and in an almost psychopathically accurate way play to them. Using speed difference between our fast emotive and our slow concept brains. This is just the simple thing that emotional messages travel faster in a room and set the context of what we notice. And then we think, but our thinking is already constricted by a focus of attention made by emotion, not by reason. So we're often solving problems way smaller than what the cause of the problem is. And if you know this, you can counter it. Okay, these are some of the keys to public relations in a big organization. I'll do another videotape with the other 5 or 6.